Okay, what we're looking at here is the jawbone of an early hominid that leads to our modern humans that are on the planet today. The only problem with this is that in our common belief system that we have now, which has been driven by some science, we're led to believe that all people came from one selected group out of Africa, and then they changed. There was this miracle thing that happened, and due to apparently what's tried to be taught is just weather differences, all of a sudden caused radical differences in people to form. What we've already found out and are finding out more and more every archaeological dig that's associated is that actually mankind is a process of hybrids that have been brought together from other points, and that hybridization led to our modern humans that we have today. Now, our earliest form of straightforward, exact modern humans that are today that we can totally tag at this point is Cro-Magnon man, which dates back to over 50,000 years ago, but just shy of 40,000 years ago was a perfected species, and we have 30,000-year-old DNA, about the oldest that we could ever recover, and it shows that his genetics are extant, are still here today. And therefore, we've changed Cro-Magnon from being an idea of some early hominid or Homo species, Homo sapiens, which led to a modern form, instead into an idea of calling them early European modern humans, because they actually still exist, and so do their haplogroups and so on today, and then the derived forms that come after that, which again seems to be driven by hybridization between different forms of Caucasians that were all across the known world. We talk about early European hunter-gatherers and so on, and how these different groups ended up intermingling with each other, making hybrid situations that led to a modern human form. There's a problem with that whole idea when we see it, though, because that instinctively says that somewhere out of Africa there were a lot of different creatures already extant out in varied forms, and the hybridization that we're talking about leading to them would have to say that there are other forms previous to the idea of 70 to 50,000 years ago modern humans walking out of Africa, and then all of a sudden morphing rapidly when we look at genetics and archaeology and we say, no, that's not the way that it happened. Science is slowly but surely leaking out the idea that this was a process of hybridization of a lot of humanoids, and the out of Africa theory may be blown totally out of the water. Well, there's been a lot of studies that have actually blown it all the way out of the water now, but we're all going back to a supposed creature that's a common ancestor at 2.1 million years ago, and people talk about Lucy and all these things, and we found now that Lucy cannot be actually attached directly to us. In fact, some of the lineages that are shown up on the evolutionary chart that everybody's familiar with are actually not even really truthfully there, because they're not part of our human lineage that we know of. Some of them might be involved in hybrid events from others that are not showing up on that scale chart still to this day. There have been a lot of more finds, and we'll look at some in a few minutes here, that have been found that are showing that archaic humans, i.e. Homo erectus and such, had lived on, not died off 300,000 years ago, but it actually lived on in certain pockets at the known edges of the world, if you will, and such places as South Africa and the islands, including the huge island of Australia and its aborigines, and how a lot of these are actually a Homo erectus type form that has been hybrided into their modern form that is today. And that hybridization comes from already modern humans, which had already previously left Africa, as they say in a lot of their case studies, some 50,000 years ago, and then re-entered back into Africa and mated with something that was still an archaic form, leading to the current forms that we have today, if you will. It's pretty interesting here when we look at it. Here's the information which shows that not 2.1 million years ago, but 7.1 million years ago, there's something that looks extremely Homo erectus-like, predating them, and it's not in Africa. If they would have found this in Africa, they would have talked about how they had cinched it and they had found the missing links and all of this concept. But because it's not in Africa, it gets thrown to the side quite a bit. People don't talk even about this too much, and they have to find more fossils of this, which I believe at this point they've only found 3. You see it listed as Greacopithicus Freybergyi. So this is the Greek ape man named after Freyberg. There's another one found that is Oranopithicus macedoniensis. This is the sun ape, or the sun worshipping ape, that lived around Macedonia. Well, we know that Greek and Macedonia are almost synonymous, and in fact a lot of people are looking at this, and even though they got named slightly different names, they're probably variations on a theme of the exact same thing, perhaps showing a small amount of hybridization in one or the other that is making the difference of the two. 7.2 million year old pre-human fossils suggest mankind arose in Europe and not in Africa. A new analysis of 2 7.2 million year old fossils belonging to a hominid species nicknamed El Greco from the Mediterranean Europe suggests that mankind emerged in Europe and not in Africa. The new study could reshape history, since it openly challenges that out of Africa theory. Now what we're talking about here is modern humans, not some listing or still living, existing proto-human form that later gets hybrided, but the actual modern human form which sprouts out of this situation that we have today. Someone might imagine if we were looking at this about 20,000 years ago, we would have a whole different outcome in what we were saying things were, but then with that 20,000 years in blending, here we can talk about it at a different point. Perhaps in 100,000 years in the future, somebody's going to look at this a totally different way. There's a video about this right here, but we're not going to watch part of it or anything, but it shows you that out of this area, which up there in that Greek Macedonian lands, perhaps came around the Mediterranean. For there were Mediterranean Caucasoid people going back 315,000 years, just off the map to the left in the bottom over here, Finger of God, in Jebel Erud Cave, and then stayed about 315,000 years. And, that's another thing that was just slumped over a little bit, but that actually added over 100,000 years to the modern human timeline of Homo sapiens. And whenever I was quite young, they always tried to play it apart as like these things changed, and then Neanderthal came, and then some of those did, and some of those didn't, and that led to this, and so on. Now we come to find out, no, those are different forms. Entirely different forms. In fact, they seem to be hybrids themselves. The weird thing is that we've done the tests of Neanderthal, and Neanderthal shows to be radically distinctly different enough to us to where we can easily tell all of their genome sequences. So they actually had something that was quite radically different than us, and we can still see it in today. And modern humans, I guess you would think of white people or Caucasian and stuff, normally have about a 1.5 to 3% average, getting all the way up to 4%. And there's a small portion of people that get a little higher. Then Oriental people seem to have a little higher. They're at the more higher end of that band and lead up to over 6% in their possible averages. Also have a Denisovan that we found. And let me just preface this next part by saying, you know, I don't think this is really going to hurt the feelings of everybody. I think just like them talking about what they know about aliens or anything else is going to freak out all the people. It really didn't seem to cause modern humans any problem to find out. Well, the Orientals found out about Denisovan stuff, and it really doesn't seem to bother them too bad. And we found out about Neanderthals. It doesn't seem to bother us. It's just part of the thing, and you go, oh, so that's how we became the spaceman heralds of mankind civilization. If they find out in a few years that we come from a kangaroo that was purple and everything, we'll be like, that's fantastic. So that's how we became the incredible spacemen heralds of civilization. If it involves all kinds of things and a web-footed duck boy, it'll be able to be like, well, that's amazing how we became the incredible heralds of civilization. So it really won't be that much of a problem for some, but others finding out the reality of the situation might be a problem. The out of Africa theory is in serious doubt, though, with these findings. When an ancient toothy lower jaw was discovered back in 1944 in Pygros Vasilius, Greece, nobody really paid attention to the fossil, as the casualties in Greece from World War II were so catastrophic that the extremely significant discovery was literally ignored by most anthropologists for decades, and then really shunned off, almost like, well, we'd already looked at that 30 years ago, right? No, we really never got into this real deep. Somebody picked it up one day. What we're looking here is early forms of hominids. These are human ancestors, if you will, of current people who are on the planet. What we have here on the top right is Homo habilis, which really looks like a monkey or something that's very much crossed with a chimpanzee-looking type. In the center, we have Homo habilis, which we can see almost as a modern form as today. And then on the left is Homo erectus, and these are all the African forms of things that had happened there. Below this, there is a Neanderthal type of person here, but this is actually known as Homo antecessor. And with that name alone, it says that he's one of our ancestors. And looking at him plainly, and you see his reddish hair and stuff, and people would, if they looked at him and didn't have a sign in front of it, they'd go, well, that's Neanderthal, right? No, Neanderthal really doesn't look like Neanderthal. We'll see that again in a second if you didn't see it a second ago. For they've refigured in all of this, and they're trying to make a smooth transition and show where there was these blends and different things that happened. And then you take those forms and modern blend them and do the different blends, you end up with different outcomes. Here on the right is a male and female of an early hominid that almost looks like Amerindians or Aztec type people, if you will. And again, that's another possible hybrid ancestor that we have here and we're talking about, and that's Heidelbergensis, because they found him in Heidelberg, just like Neanderthalensis was in the Neander Valley. In fact, speaking of which, they show a Homo neanderthalensis, and then it says a male Homo sapiens sapiens. If you look at here, they have 7 listed in 6, and it said a male and female of 1. They only show the male for there in the bottom left-hand corner, so it's not correct unless you want to say this man is a female. Doesn't seem like it plans out just right, but here we're looking at forms of Neanderthals in its female form and male, with its reddish blonde hair. We talk about green eyes and things, and there we have a problem with having this idea that everybody just sprouted from one cabbage patch, that everybody was on one boat that flooded, that really was only one people's story. And whenever you delve into it, it was really the Sumerian story about Samaria, and that one area had flooded in. And to him, or to them, it was the entire world. Or looking back at old ideas of the younger Dryas and how that flooding of the world up and losing much of the coastal areas, a lot of lands like Doggerland that we've looked at, and areas like around the Black Sea that got inundated and lost most of its coastlines. In fact, the entire world lost a major portion of its coastlines. But this isn't about that flood idea that everybody around the world talked about. When it comes to modern human origins, the out-of-Africa hypothesis has remained the dominant theory for decades, which suggests that every living human being is descended from a small group in Africa who then dispersed into the wider world, displacing earlier forms such as Neanderthals and Denisovans. However, according to Sky News reports, the birthplace of modern human beings may have been the Eastern Mediterranean and not Africa, as an internal team of scientists studying the ancient fossils of a tooth and lower jawbone now suggests. Understanding in its simplest form, the concept here is they were trying to get something that looks a lot like the jawbone that they're finding here, El Greco, that was 2.1 million years ago, and try to go off of that, out of Africa, right? This thing dates to 7.2. So if it predates it, and it predates any fossil that we can find of this type of hominid that we can attach to humans in Africa, it looks like, given 5 million years worth of time, they actually made it from Greece to Africa. If you're going to believe that people could have went out of Africa to Greece in such a short period of time, surely you can imagine that it went the other way just as freaking easy. Although there's a pinch coming into Africa if one was to go around the coastline of the Mediterranean, which means Middle Earth, then they would easily run around that. And we, of course, have archaeological studies showing early Caucasoid humans around the entire Mediterranean, which means Middle Earth, dating up to 315,000 years, and what we know of as Caucasians and Cro-Magnon man, that if you look up the range of Cro-Magnon man, it shows you all of North Africa, but not really around the eastern seaboard, Spain and France, and of course all the cave paintings we know about. And that strangely leads to the idea that these people were maritime, or you would find some of their remains somewhere else at that time, but there's a gap there. And then where'd they go? Well, they just spread all across and mixed in with early people that were already there. But the problem is, too, as I was trying to say earlier, where could possible Neanderthals come from? One might say that they went out earlier and then just changed like a miracle, like things are supposed to do, but we're not seeing that in any records whatsoever. We're seeing that a lot of these drastic changes are done by hybrids, but it's because something looked like left and something looked like right got together, and you end up with something a little different. And variations on a theme, if you follow me on left and right, of that same concept leads to various forms or variations on a theme. We can see this in birds and wrens and things like that, and ironically now we're back to somebody like Darwin looking at different finches and so on, and realizing due to the way that they ate and everything, they'd kind of developed differences over time. This, of course, is natural selection. But you can imagine that the one in the middle islands of the two might actually be a hybrid of the two. In its simplest form of idea, what we're trying to talk about now. So, DNA finds Aboriginal Australians are our oldest civilization in the world, and somebody's going to go hooting and hollering about how great that is, but actually what they're finding out is that they're actually still Homo erectus living to this point, or that variation on a theme that was there from ancient times. It's like a recent video I did showing you that what we call of as West Sub-Saharans nowadays had actually derived from somebody at Iwaliru, just 9,100 BC, which still looked like Homo erectus basically at 140,000 years which in Africa had already surpassed its point. Simultaneously, there was a paper that came out that said Homo erectus had pretty much died off of being lazy, that they chose easiest forms of stuff, and even whenever there was good stone to use right there, they wouldn't go do it. They would try to pick up a stone that was just there in front of them, and all these variations on a theme. But now we're finding out that they do live on in the modern day, and they lived all the way till about 4400 BC, and then previous modern humans, which already were modern humans, they even say in the paper, and left Africa as modern humans already. So where's this magic change happen? Oh, they're dropping that out a long time ago, but people aren't paying attention. Yeah, the cold weather doesn't all of a sudden make things happen like that. I.e., you can take people from India with dark skin or black people and put them in the cold weather, and it's been generations and stuff now, and if they're lightning at all, it's not because of that. It's more because of admix, which imparts a lighter skin form on them. Is this thing going to come back? Yeah. So here are all these different forms, and I think you can tell that there are different forms. There's this African type form of hominids, and of course the modern humans there show an 19%, up to 19% unknown ghost hominid. And a lot of people believe that it is one of these that they had bred along with, or it's the actual remnants of their own primordial genetics still extant because they're hybrids. It's another theory entirely that's coming out of this, and this idea that there was a lot of hybrid forms that happened. So when it comes to modern humans, that idea of what's a modern human, of course, is done by scientists and everything, and then when we've looked into this, everybody tries to say it's racist and all these weird things if you try to point these things out. Some people would like to say that they were here the first, but then that would say that they're really a hominid and not a modern human, or that what their form is a hybrid type form. Here we see not only their jaw, but their teeth. And the one neat thing about their teeth that definitely shows up as something that's a little bit different is that they actually have roots that are coexisting and attached, and they're different than other hominids, but very much like modern humans have. So even their root structure and so on that they find in their lower jaws seem to be corresponding with this, as you can see here in the virtual reconstructions. So El Greco appears to be the oldest known pre-human in history. Of course, 7.2 is older than 2.1, and that one they're unsure of. This one seems to have more closer relations to it, and oddly almost looks like more of a modern form at an earlier date, leaving the idea that the 2.1 might actually be a hybrid of this and another more archaic hominid who is yet to been discovered or defined. Something that could breed together. A lot of times whenever things breed together, they become a mule, and that's understood by a lot of people. But also there are times whenever they don't, just like there's Rh negative blood factors, and eventually something, and I don't know, like Jurassic Park, life finds a way, and so you'll end up having a hybrid that forms out of that. Now, Rh factor causes breeds or different subsets of people breeding together to try to not form, but once you've passed that form, and especially get into the mitochondrial or mtDNA, then it becomes successful, such as when we breed tigers and lions together and end up with a liger. If done with, I believe the formula is female lion, male tiger, that female liger is looked at as more fertile even actually than the original tigers or the lions were. So in 2012, the ancient jawbone was joined by a fossilized premolar tooth and uncovered in Asmaka, Bulgaria. Scientists suggest that the remains belong to an ape-like creature, Greacopithicus Freybergyi, which is now believed to be the oldest known pre-human, dating as far back as 7.2 million years. With the help of microcomputer tomography and 3D reconstructions of the roots, and internal structure of the fossilized teeth, the researchers discovered distinctive features of contemporary humans and their early ancestors in a mix. 7.24 million year old upper premolar of Greacopithicus Freybergyi. Project director Madeleine Boehm of the Senckenberg Center for Human Evolution and Paleoenvironment at University of Tübingen, co-author Nikolai Spasov from the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, and their colleagues examined both the Pygos fossil and the related upper premolar tooth. El Greco is known to be potentially a hominid of humans, and he is several 100,000 years older than the oldest potential pre-human from Africa, which is Sahelanthropus from Chad, Spasov stated, as Seeker reports. There isn't actually a great connection in Sahelanthropus, but a possible one, and in that fact, this still predates that, and it looks like there's a better connection to what we call modern humans, or in the hybrids of Homo sapiens sapiens. Anthropologists refer to El Greco as a hominid or pre-human for now because the last common ancestor of modern humans is chimps, retain both non-human primate and human characteristics. However, with the help of computer tomography, Boehm and her colleagues noticed that El Greco's features were evolving into a more modern human-like forms. So what we're saying is, kind of like that first picture in the top right where it was really a manky looking thing that looked a lot more like, Land of the Apes or whatever, Planet of the Apes. It looked a lot more like that, or the modern form of that concept. God, if this doesn't keep resetting. But what's odd about that is they're telling you right now that this thing seems more human than a lot of other forms that are still seen as hominids that we were talking about having correlations with in Africa, if you follow me. This thing reloads again, I'm going to get sick. So I'm talking about this type of character and how different that is than this type of character and how that is kind of like that. And hey, just think about this to yourself. If you were to take and breed these two together, would you end up with something like that? Possibly. Or is there other things at play? So these just a few teeth quite often give scientists a lot of ideas, but here we're looking at Greacopithecus right here. Here again is Oranopithicus macedoniensis, right? And it has those joined roots and so on that we've been talking about, right? Furthermore, one of the researchers, David Begin from the University of Toronto, believes that if we move Greacopithecus to our own line, i.e. if he is along our line, then mankind's history could be written. If this indeed is a human, it would be the oldest human ancestor known and the first to be identified out of Africa and predate all the African finds. Ever since Darwin, conventional wisdom is that the last common ancestors of chimpanzees and humans lived in Africa. Our research shows that the earliest humans may have evolved in Europe, and it may not actually have come from something like people have originally tried to say up until recently. El Greco's descendants may have migrated into Africa, actually. Although Boehm appears to be confident that El Greco's ancestors are Eurasian hominids, such as Oranopithecus from Greece, she and her team are not ruling out the scenario that some of these descendants possibly migrated to Africa at some point, and of course they consider it most possible that several of his descendants, as well as other early prehumans, remained in the Mediterranean and spread throughout Europe and Asia. If this theory is true, then it's possible that his descendants could have evolved into Neanderthals, Denisovans, and the early humans known from these geographical areas that are directly related to people of European and Asian origins nowadays. Kind of leaving out one in that setup right there, but that shows you that some people were not involved in a lot of what went on afterwards. And then we find an unknown hominid in their ingression. Strangely, we find that same type of thing happening with Australian Aborigines, and I'll have an upcoming video about that because all of these correlations are starting to add up to a different outcome than what was previously thought. The only sure thing is that if more evidence confirms such theories in the near future, human history as we know it today would be drastically changed. A Spasov tells Seeker, our new hypothesis is now a smoking gun. And so it all started from a tooth, and lo and behold, human origin stories seem to be a lot more fibrated, involve a lot of hybrids and situations. And then where do all these hybrids that are out of Africa already and have derived their even separate forms come from before these people come out and run into them, like Neanderthals and so on? Let me know what you think downstairs. Peace.